The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good people, good comrades, wherever you are in the world. This is another episode of the Pantsula Podcast. I am Jamilah. I am here with Comrade Evan. We are in the Kaji Circle in the A-APRP. The A-APRP, of course, is an organization which advocates and works towards the goal, the objective of a unified socialist Africa. What is that? Pan-Africanism. And we have our theme that we're discussing today, which is African Liberation Day. African Liberation Day is held globally on the 25th of May. There are various events around that day, but the actual day is the 25th of May. So we have a series of events. There's things happening on the 21st to the 29th. We're going to discuss a little bit of that, but we're going to primarily discuss the main event, the main day of ALD. And before we start discussing ALD, there are some Africans we want to honor, our ancestors, because what do we say every time? Without them, there is no us doing this work. We stand on their shoulders. So it is fitting for us to honor our ancestors every week. Evan, who are the ancestors today?
Our two ancestors for this episode, they will be Ali Lapointe, or also known as Ali Amar, and Haja Aminata Toure. So Ali Lapointe, he was a guerrilla fighter with the National Liberation Front in Algeria. They fought against the French settler occupation of Algeria. If you're a revolutionary or just someone who's familiar with a great cinema of colonial people who fight against their occupiers, if you ever seen the film The Battle of Algiers, a big part of that is about the Battle of Algiers, and the main character Ali is based on Ali Lapointe, who was captured and executed by the French army during that battle. And so if you've seen it before, always see it again. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it, as it's an inspiring film. And if you want to organize, you want to fight for the liberation of your people, for Africans, then that's one of the films to do so. And
it's one of the greatest movies of all time. I'll just say that.
Yes. And our second ancestor is someone who transitioned recently, Haja Aminata Toure, who was part of the PDG RDA of Guinea. She was mayoress and is also as the eldest daughter of one of the founders of the A-APRP, Ahmed Sekou Toure. She transitioned in this January, and we also have a statement from them about the National Political Bureau of the Democratic Party of Guinea, the Rassemblement Démocratique Africain. The bureaucrats denounced the people of Guinea, to African peoples, to His Excellency Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, President of the Transition Supreme Chief of the Army, Chief of State, His Excellency the Prime Minister and his government, military and civil, which is the death of Comrade Haja Aminata Toure, member of the National Political Bureau of the PDG RDA, mayoress of Kaloum, as I said, eldest daughter of Sekou Toure. And we just always want to honor people who can consistently building these Pan-African organizations, and they've been doing so regardless. And again, it's because she's related to one of our ancestors. Doesn't mean that she hasn't done work of her own. So that's one thing we also want to remind you, and is that in either case, the work might look a little different depending on what part of the revolution and the building of Pan-African organization But either way, it's really important to let you know that masses are building. So you gotta remember, and speaking of the masses and African liberation, we're gonna talk about African Liberation Day. You wonder, like, African Liberation Day, what? If you're not familiar with it, like African Liberation Day, if you're somewhat familiar with some of the calendars, like you see something from the UN, like the United Nations, they'll have stuff for certain days and weeks and months and years, and in a lot of cases, or the African Union as well, they might have something called Africa Day, which is held the same day. But we want to put the emphasis on African Liberation Day, because the whole point is to make focus that while Africa has had like flag independence, that where Africa is not truly free, and we're always want to work towards actual independence of Africa, united under scientific socialism. So it was founded in 1958. Kwame Nkrumah convened the first Conference of Independent States held in Accra, Ghana, attended by 8 independent African states. At that time, it was April 15th, which was declared African Freedom Day, to mark each year the onward progress of the liberation movement and to symbolize the determination of the people of Africa to free themselves from foreign domination and exploitation. In between 1958 and 1963, the nation class struggle intensified in Africa and the world. 17 countries in Africa won their independence, and 1960 was proclaimed the year at Africa. Further advances were made to defeat U.S. imperialism in Asia and the Caribbean. Imperialism responded to this tide of victories by assassinating revolutionary leaders and U.S. troops from Vietnam. So everyone, okay, why May 25th then? So on May 25th, 1963, 31 African heads of states convened a summit meeting to found the Organization of African Unity. They renamed African Freedom Day African Liberation Day and changed the date to May 25th. And if you want to know more about the history, you can go to AfricanLiberationDay.net. I'll give you more about the history as well as past ALDs and the upcoming ALDs happening this weekend and next week.
Yes, indeed. And the theme for this year, preparing for a leap forward to worldwide Pan-African unity. Neo-colonialism must be dismantled. And one thing I like to do is do a 20-second or less argument or definition of something. So neo-colonialism, if you're not aware of what that is, if it's you're going to somewhere in Africa and you're seeing a leader who looks just like you're seeing a president, you're seeing a head of state or whatever. Somehow though, that leader, head of state, president, etc., is being controlled by colonialist forces. So the fact that, in Africa, they're speaking French, the fact that they're using currency that may be French, people speaking Portuguese. So those things are aspects of neo-colonialism. Yes, I took longer than 20 seconds, but when we as Africans do not have a national language, so the official language could be French, the fact that, again, currency that is not distinct to Africa is being used, the fact that a legal system might not be distinctly African or Caribbean or whatever. So you're using a British legal system in Jamaica, for example. So those are examples of neo-colonialism. So maybe that was sort of a minute and a half definition, but I think it's important to, when having these types of discussions, people defending capitalism, you need to understand in 20 seconds or less what that is. So you can counter their defenses, you can counter their arguments. So understanding neo-colonialism, somebody whose face looks like you, but their interests do not represent you. They represent the interest of imperialism and the original colonialism.
Yep, and in addition to that, one of the things that makes neo-colonialism specifically treacherous is not only the fact that the leadership and that location look like you, but also that it might not just be, let's say you're a former French colony. It might not just be the French capitalists who are exploiting you. It might be also British capital. It might be U.S. capital. It might be Portuguese. It might be German capital, and so forth. Another thing is that it could be multiple forces that while the original colonizers they took advantage of things and did stuff like divide and conquer, use some of the local leadership there to teach them the ways of the colonizers and how to rule over and all these things. It's another thing is that even if you notice that, oh, we want the French out, yeah, and while it might be great that you get Total, you get the Citroen, you get all these other A-APRP, you get all these like French businesses out. You might have AT&T there. You might still have a telecom. You may still have a T-Mobile or something from other languages. And one book we obviously recommend, since we talk about neo-colonialism, is that of Kwame Ture, Neo-Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism.
So with that, it is really crucial that we need to have a common identity as Africans. When people talk about identifying as an African, for us, it is primarily political. It is not simply a location on the map, because there are Africans all over the map. But as Africans politically, we have a common goal. What is that? Having a unified socialist Africa. As we have ALD events, that's always going to be up for discussion. They are creating solutions to get to this objective. So it's not simply sitting down and talking about what could be or what we want. It's actually working towards goals to reach this objective. We need ALD in order to create particular plans, because ALD is organized by various organizations. It's held in various places around the world where there are various political parties. But again, there are still simple objectives we have because we understand what is at stake. Neo-colonialism is in various parts of the globe, as you mentioned, Evan. So we have this series of events to say, okay, what's at stake? The conditions are the same. Capitalism is everywhere, but there might be different issues each year. And so as we carry the different themes, it's like, okay, how are things changing technologically? How are things changing? There might be a new president in or whatever, but again, still controlled by these outside forces. How do we shift those things? The conversation right now about lifting sanctions to Venezuela. On one end, yeah, on the surface, that's great, but we also know what imperialism has in store. It's like, oh, we want to emphasize on lifting sanctions because we know that's going to hurt Russia, for instance, whatever. So just because you have an African in office, that doesn't mean their interests are of the same mind as the rest of the masses. So we need to have something in place where we can all come together. Capitalism is not going to end in our lifetime, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't plan for it. So having ALD every single year is going to continue the legacy of what they started. Just as what we're doing in the A-APRP is continuing the legacy of the 5th Pan-African Congress. So just because you have this event in 1945, you have an event in 1958, and particular days are established, that work still needs to be done. The material conditions of Africans globally are still in a very, very, very serious space where we are not liberated. So ALD, African Liberation Day, this isn't just like, oh, people of African descent, you just need to vote. And then you can, no, this is planning for our destiny. As Africans, we need to control our destiny. So this is very important to understand. It is not just having a face that looks like you in a particular position. If the masses do not own the means of production, it doesn't matter that that individual face has some sort of influence, especially if that influence is dictated by outside forces. So we definitely need to come together. Obviously, it has to be more than once a year, but it's a concentrated, organized force And ALD is really crucial for that. So as all the organizations come together and do whatever they're doing as their particular organizations, it's a collective event. It's a collective effort. So this is really crucial. ALD forever, ALD today, ALD tomorrow, ALD every day.
Exactly. And to follow what Kwame Ture said is that you think not only of the thing of the lifting sanctions on Venezuela, you also think of the recent news about the United States going to send troops to Somalia just after they had an election there, because there was they had a deal over it was oil, and they had a deal, and then all of a sudden, on second thought, maybe we need to consider that. And as soon as that happens, like, but the Biden administration, the collective capitalists will think, hey, we need to have control over Somalia like we've had the last few decades. And so they decide to troops back that were previously withdrawn. And so again, if you had a unified Africa that could put pressure, say, no, you're not coming here. You're not doing that. Well, another part is for ALD is that not only, as Simone says, that not only is it like a chance for us to discuss some of the more important issues, but also think about the questions. And one thing, like during our planning for African Liberation Day, is that we're thinking about, for example, for the theme of neo-colonialism, we're coming up with questions about how we can make sure that the organizations and people involved have the kind of idea of, like, okay, yeah, we're not talking about neo-colonialism, but we got to make sure we know what neo-colonialism is, and then we also talk about how it is affecting certain ways. Then you think about neo-colonialism and like the COVID pandemic. You think about the role of neo-colonialism against and patriarchy. You think about neo-colonialism, settler colonialism, Zionism. You're thinking about technology. You think about this, all sorts of different things. So you have to consider, and other organizations who that they have the different ideas of what to do, and there's an exchange about it. And even with that, some of it still involves African cultural entertainment to make sure that not only are we collaborating politically, militarily, so forth, but also that we have an idea of our culture. If we want to unify as Africans, we also have to make sure that we have some of the culture that can unify us. So,
absolutely, I want to bring up a couple of things. You mentioned the cultural aspect, and that's one of the facets of the African personality. So it's not simply the military strategy. It's not simply the strict political education, because you can use music, you can use art as a means to carry that political education. So we use all aspects of our culture, whether it's artistically, whether it's spiritually, whether it's materially, to fuel this energy to drive towards our liberation. And so it's not simply somebody, like, it's not just anybody coming to perform simply because they're African. Like that, it's just like, no. I know in some cases, people call it edutainment. So, that's probably the perfect way of putting it. And so the art as well has a particular purpose. It serves to drive the work. So it's not just singing a bunch of songs and going, yeah, we can be rich. It's not that at all. And the other thing I wanted to say is connecting the struggle against neo-colonialism for Africans, but there are other groups, other organizations also aligned with the struggle for African liberation. There's the Palestinian liberation struggle. There's the Indigenous liberation struggle. There's the Irish liberation struggle. And so they all have an understanding of the primacy of Africa. All of these things are connected. So when we mention the some government officials, senators, or whatever, being like, oh, you should drop the sanctions for Venezuela, also understand what's happening in Somalia. Those are connected. Pulling sanctions doesn't mean that it's out of the kindness of people's hearts to do that. There is no moral compass when it comes to capitalism, when it comes to imperialism. It is a chess move that they feel is going to benefit them. So having an ALD with so many organizations, whether or not they're African, understanding what's at stake economically, ecologically, material, all of these things, Africa is at stake and is primary. The materials we get, yes, there's lithium in various parts of the world, but you have coltan, you have rubber, you have all of these things which drive the economy for other corporations, where they dig and they exploit the resources directly from Africa. So the phones that you are using, the laptops, the desktops, all of these devices that are powered by materials found in the Congo. We have to make these connections with all of the things going on. So we can't separate what's happening in Venezuela from what's happening in Africa. They are connected, but we understand as well that Africa is primary. Africa literally drives what is happening around the rest of the world. And for these forces to come in and say, okay, as Africa's and frankly, other indigenous parts of the world are becoming more socialist, we see that the imperialist forces and neo-colonialism driving harder to maintain. So we have to, regardless of what liberation movement we are, we have to connect. There's no way we can do this alone. It has to be the masses, of course, but it can't just be like, well, you're not African. I can't hang out with you. African Liberation Day is crucial, but we have to understand that there are other liberation movements that support African Liberation Day as well. I just wanted to name those two things because a lot of people, well, why you got this person over here in ALD? I thought, it's like, we understand that this is a struggle for land. Land is power. So other folks are also fighting for land. We understand that connection. So anyone who is fighting to get their land back, we support. So it's very important to be open about that. So yes, we do have folks in other organizations that are very much in support of ALD, African Liberation Day forever, because that is the driving force for the rest of the world, and people understand that. So it makes sense to support that.
And not to mention, like, not only is it an issue of land, but in all cases of liberation, it's also a liberation against colonialism. Imperialism, also liberation against patriarchy. So, and a major part is to make sure that there's order of capitalism, patriarchy, and with the national oppression, that all of these are overthrown. That one, these are all connected. There's ancestor Collier Jones talked about the triple oppression, and you gotta make sure you fight against that. And to go another example of as far as neo-colonialism is about we talked about the lithium, coltan. Another is copper. A large part of the clean the clean energy boom is like a lot of it's going to involve copper, and one of the major countries that has a copper mine is Zambia. And funny enough, the recently elected president of Zambia was a little more friendly to U.S. interests, as far as which counters some long-term relationship that Zambia and China have had. So again, you talk about, we have the Zambian president that looks like us, but are that the said leadership going to use that wealth from the copper to support the masses of Africans there, and elsewhere, or are they just going to use for some U.S. or Canadian mines or some other mines? So, and speaking of understanding connections, we also want to make sure that we talk about ALD and what brought us to ALD and how does influence our organization. So, comment, so talk a little bit about the role of ALD for you.
The role of ALD for me is what actually inspired me to join the A-APRP. So it was a Jamu Umi, and we were both living in Portland, and we were organizing through a coalition. I was in another organization, and he was, of course, in the A-APRP, would always talk about the A-APRP. I went to my first ALD, I guess, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And it was in Oakland. And right after that, I said, I'm joining the A-APRP. Understanding, and you talking about the cultural aspect, you're talking about the political aspect, you're talking about being with folks who understand what's at stake. And it is an event that I think everyone should go to. I don't care who you are. I think it will definitely, if you're not African, inspire you just to do that type of work. And even if you are African and decide not to join the A-APRP, I don't think you're gonna go to an ALD event and go, oh, I hate it. Oh, I'm not gonna, like, that doesn't make any sense. I've never seen that in my life. And there are people I've seen who've gone to ALD who didn't join an organization at first, but down the line, they were like, yeah, that really inspired me. I'm gonna join an organization. I've never seen anyone who was not inspired to do work around liberation after going to an ALD. So whether or not you join the A-APRP, we encourage everyone to join any organization, regardless of what that is, as long as that is for the people's liberation, as long as it's doing something positive for the masses. But yeah, I really don't think anyone's going to come out of an ALD event not inspired. I just don't. I don't know about you, whatever you've seen, but I haven't seen that.
It's definitely inspired me, and we have all these people who are involved that want to put out this entertainment, they put out this education. You're just hearing all this like discussion with people, and you're just like, I want to hear more. I want to hear more. Like, and even if you're not, even if you think at the time you might be too busy, but you still want to like talk to people. Say, hey, I heard about this thing, like this project you're doing. I want one more of it. Maybe you say, oh, I want to donate here, or I want to do this like with action, and after a while, you're like, you know what? Maybe I need to get more involved. And you go to, and then you go to another ALD, and you're like, yeah. And hey, not only do I want to join the organization, I want to actually be a part of it and actually create it. And so, yeah, like it's something that you gotta go. You gotta attend it, and even if it's not for the A-APRP, like other like African organizations who are hosting African Liberation Day celebrations, and not to mention like there are different branches of A-APRP, the chapters who are doing so on the continent and elsewhere. So again, so you go to AfricanLiberationDay.net, you go there, you have the different ALDs there. Of course, you can always go online on social media. Or maybe if you know areas where like organizations tend to have, like African organizations tend to congregate, maybe you have something there on like a bulletin board or sticker or something like that, and then go from there.
One thing I definitely appreciate is talking about technological advances. So all of the ALDs I've been to before the pandemic have been in person. There was a shift. It's like, okay, how can we still hold ALD events and spread it with the people? And so many coordinations to get that to happen. And I think, it's turned out relatively smoothly. It's been wonderful to, for myself, I'm not able to get out as well as I used to. So being able to still participate in one way or another, and the fact that it is going to be a stream, I think those are some great things. Again, understanding the material conditions, understanding that there are going to be limitations in how we do things now, but how are we able to continue to do this work? I think it's great. So I look forward to having another positive ALD. It's I definitely look forward to it.
And same here. And for the one that are for our international webcast, the actual ALD will happen on the 24th. So the main one will be on the 24th. But if you happen to miss it, you're stuck at the slave, you're busy, you just have something else happen, we'll have it the next day. And of course, the presentation will be saved on the A-APRP International YouTube channel. And on the 25th, there'll also be a live stream from our sister organization, the PAIGC. We'll have an event there and speaking from that. And so you get double the action right there.
Before we round this out, we want to say, join an organization. Join an organization. Join an organization, because why? Organization decides everything. You organize your time around capitalism. Why not organize your time around the liberation of the people? ALD might be a place to start. If you haven't done that, you've been thinking about it, ALD might be a place to start. So tune in. We will post the link so you can log in, you can register, you can do all that stuff. But we just ask you, join an organization, and ALD might be the place to inspire you to do that. We also have our comrades who do other podcasts as well. So we have our Ancestors' Voices, and they've discussed ALD. We've had the weekly Pan-African News discussing ALD. We've had Revolutionary African Women. We have the Forward Ever podcast. There's the Forward Ever shop. There's so many ways you can get connected. But all we ask of you, and we don't ask of much, but all we ask of you is to join an organization. Join an organization. Join an organization, because what? Organization decides everything.
And if you don't think the A-APRP is the organization for you, you might meet someone there, or a few people there that might want to join, might form an organization together, fighting for justice, fighting for the liberation of Africans, or fighting for liberation against this imperialist racist patriarchal system. But again, another opportunity there to do so. As we say, forward ever, backwards never.
Forward ever, backwards never. Yes.